Me, greater than 27, name's Olex, grew up in military family. Grandfather fought in Vietnam, father in Iraq. I believed service was the path of honor, the kind of life men in my family lived. I joined the reserves to carry that tradition proudly, dreamed of wearing the uniform with dignity, imagined myself earning respect through discipline, through sacrifice, through courage, like those before me. But the army I entered wasn't the same at all. Training's no longer about grit, sweat, or survival. Instead, lectures about language filled our schedule. Avoid offensive words. Watch for microaggressions, they said. Rules wrapped tighter than any drill sergeant's voice. If someone slipped with a rough joke, a complaint could drag them into endless offices. I told myself, rules are rules, follow quietly. Kept my head down, convinced honor was still here. Until the day those rules turned against me personally, and everything I believed in started breaking apart. It happened during a morning formation. I called out to my unit automatically. "Listen up, guys," I said loudly. "Just a habit, nothing intentional at all." A few women stood in the line quietly. Later that day, a complaint appeared officially. HR tone voices called it exclusionary language. Said my words erased female presence in ranks. I sat in the office writing explanations nervously, trying to defend something I never meant wrongly. The officer warned me with cold, sharp tone. "Next time this could affect your contract entirely." I walked out stunned, disbelief boiling inside me. I had grown up on war stories of grit. Grandfather carrying wounded soldiers through jungles bravely. Father saving comrades in desert firefights proudly. And here I was punished for saying guys. I told myself stay quiet, swallow it down. But the weight of it pressed harder each day. The breaking point came during a night exercise. Cold field, mud under boots, stars overhead. One of the girls in my unit stumbled hard. Her ankle twisted, pain sharp in her face. She tried to stand but collapsed again instantly. The wind cut cold, risk of hypothermia rising. I didn't think, just lifted her on my shoulders. Carried her nearly a kilometer back to safety. My chest burned, legs heavy, but I pushed on. Because leaving her out there wasn't an option. I thought I'd done the right thing clearly. Thought I'd shown the meaning of brotherhood and service. But the next morning I was summoned again. She had filed a complaint against me directly. Said I made her feel weak, humiliated publicly. Claimed my act was hidden discrimination quietly. I sat stunned, words caught in my throat. Officers discussed it coldly across the table, calling my actions a display of toxic protection. I couldn't believe what I was hearing inside. Saving a soldier from freezing was now harmful. The same action my grandfather once called heroic, now labeled as a microaggression in official reports. I sat in that gray office stunned and silent. Officers flipping papers, marking words with pens. They spoke about values, optics, appearances constantly. Not once about survival, not once about duty. I left the meeting with my stomach hollow. Rumors spread quickly through the barracks afterward. Some avoided me, others whispered behind my back. The respect I once felt slipping away fast. Everywhere I went, I carried invisible weight. The sense that I was already guilty always, even when my only crime was helping. Weeks later, the decision finally arrived coldly. Contract will not be renewed, the letter said. Reason given, failure to align with modern values. Just like that, my service ended without honor. I packed my things quietly from the barracks. Uniform folded, boots tucked away without ceremony. No farewell, no handshakes, just silence around me. My family once celebrated service with pride. Now I walked out branded as misfit instead. I thought of my grandfather's medals in a box, of my father's stories told at the dinner table, how they were honored for carrying wounded soldiers, how they were respected for protecting their comrades, and me, punished for the very same instinct. I traded my uniform for oil-stained coveralls, started working in a small auto repair shop, hands black with grease, nails cracked with dirt. Engines replaced rifles, wrenches replaced drills. Customers barely looked at me twice daily. And at night, I locked the garage doors slowly. Sitting in silence, the thought gnawed inside. That honor meant something once to my family. But now words mattered more than sacrifice did. Sometimes I scroll through socials late at night, See guys from my old unit posting proudly. Smiling selfies with captions about the new army. Hashtags about equality, progress, modern values. Their uniforms crisp, their faces confident still. I don't comment, don't argue, just stare silently. Because I know what that system really did. I know how quickly it turned on me. Not for laziness, not for cowardice, not for failure, but for calling my squad guys instinctively once. And for carrying a soldier who couldn't walk. My grandfather would have been called a hero then. My father too, respected for the same action. But me? Branded unfit, erased without hesitation. I wipe grease from my hands every shift. Lock up the shop, step into the night, and wonder if honor was buried with them. Or if I just lived long enough to see it twisted. Some nights I dream of the old stories. My grandfather's voice deep, steady at the table, telling how he crawled through mud in Vietnam, carrying wounded men on his back bravely. Bullets flying, jungle thick, fear everywhere around. He called it duty, not heroism, just duty. My father echoed the same from Iraq years later. Firefights in the desert, explosions lighting the sky. He said the only thing that mattered then was keeping your brothers alive beside you. I grew up believing those words like scripture. Believing service was about courage, sacrifice, trust. But the world I entered didn't honor that. Instead, it weighed every word heavier than action, measured loyalty in phrases, not in deeds. And I carried the weight of that betrayal daily. A family legacy turned into a quiet shame. All because I did what they once celebrated. I kept working at the shop quietly each day. Engines became my battlefield, greased my uniform. Customers thanked me more than commanders ever did. Strangers valued my work fixing cars honestly, more than officers valued me carrying a soldier. Still, the ache of failure clung to me nightly. I thought often of that girl from training, wondered if she truly believed I meant harm, or if she just followed the new culture blindly. Her words had ended my career completely. Sometimes anger burned, other times only sadness remained. Because I never wanted glory, only to serve. To stand in line like my father once. To be part of something bigger with honor. Instead, I was cast out for kindness, ironically. Now I wear scars no one sees clearly. Scars of being told my loyalty was wrong. In a world that values image over truth. I started noticing the difference in simple things. The way grease under my nails told truth. No one judged me for fixing engines daily. Yet saving a soldier had branded me dangerous. The contradiction ate at me every night. My hands once carried rifles with pride firmly. Now they carried wrenches and oil filters instead. And somehow this life felt more honest strangely. At least here, no one twisted my actions. No one searched for hidden offense in my words. I missed the uniform, but not the silence. Not the cold offices and rehearsed accusations. Still, a part of me longed for respect. For the bond my grandfather described proudly. For the brotherhood my father swore was unbreakable. I wondered if such a thing even existed now. Or if modern rules had gutted it forever, leaving only slogans where duty once lived. One evening I sat alone in the garage. Tools scattered, radio humming low in the background. I stared at my reflection in a grease-stained window. Saw a man my grandfather wouldn't recognize fully. Not because of work, but because of silence. I had swallowed too much, let rules erase me. And I wondered if speaking louder would have mattered. If fighting the accusations would have changed anything. But the army didn't want explanations anymore. They wanted compliance, perfect words, polished image. I lit a cigarette, thought of my father's stories. How he said loyalty was thicker than fear. And realized that in my world, fear won. Fear of offense, fear of words, fear of truth. I exhaled smoke, the taste bitter on my tongue, knowing I had carried someone to safety and been punished like it was a crime. The thought sat heavy, harder than any weight I'd lifted. I avoided reunions with my old unit deliberately. Couldn't stomach the smiles in their group photos. The captions about progress, the hashtags about equality. None of it matched the reality I endured. Sometimes one of them messaged politely, "How's life?" I'd reply short, "Working at a shop, all good." Never mention the nights I sat awake restless, thinking of the uniform folded in my closet, thinking of the contract that ended with shame. To them, I was just gone quietly. But to me, I was erased completely. Not for failing the mission, but for saving someone. A truth too bitter to explain in texts. So I let them keep their illusions safe. And I carried my silence like another uniform. Worn and heavy, invisible to everyone else. A reminder of the army that broke me. Without a single shot fired. Sometimes customers asked if I'd ever served. I nodded briefly, wiping grease from my hands. They'd smile, say, "Thank you for your service," kindly. And the words cut deeper than they realized. Because I wasn't thanked, I was discarded instead. Not a hero, not even a soldier anymore. Just a cautionary tale whispered in offices quietly. I forced a smile, swallowed the ache inside. But later, locking the garage at night slowly, I thought about those words echoing hollowly. My grandfather had earned them with medals proudly. My father with scars from desert firefights. Me, I earned only paperwork in silence. All for carrying someone who couldn't walk. The irony gnawed like rust on steel. I wondered if one day my children would ask, and I'd have to tell them the truth. That service no longer meant sacrifice, only slogans. I drove past the base once out of habit. Watched recruits jogging in perfect lines together. Their shouts carried across the field loudly. But the spirit felt different than I remembered. Discipline replaced with performance, brotherhood with suspicion. I parked for a moment, engine idling quietly, and thought of the man I used to be. The pride I felt the first time in uniform. The way my chest swelled telling my family. Now replaced with a hollow ache deep inside. I wondered if any of those recruits knew how fragile their careers had actually become. How one word could end everything instantly. How saving a comrade could be twisted cruelly. I drove off before anyone could notice me. Hands tight on the wheel, heart heavy. Knowing the army I dreamed of serving no longer existed the way my family remembered. At home, I opened my grandfather's old trunk. Inside were medals, photos, folded uniforms neatly. The smell of age and history filled the air. I traced the edges of a silver star slowly. Remembered his voice telling me jungle stories vividly. How he carried men bleeding through mud bravely. How no one asked about words, only actions. My father's letters sat beside them in envelopes. Written from a rock, sand still clinging faintly. He wrote about nights under fire constantly. About brothers who pulled each other through chaos. I closed the lid, my throat burning hard. Because my story didn't belong in that trunk. My service ended not with honor, but paperwork. Not medals, just accusations of wrong words. I wondered if I had broken the legacy, or if the legacy itself had been betrayed. And that question followed me into sleep every night. I started writing down my thoughts in a notebook. Not for anyone else, just to breathe easier. Pages filled with questions I couldn't silence inside. What does honor mean if words outweigh sacrifice? What does equality mean if kindness is punished? What does service mean if brotherhood no longer exists? Sometimes the writing turned angry, sharp lines scrawled. Other times it sank into quiet sadness slowly. I wrote about the girl I carried that night. Wondered if she remembered the cold on the field. Wondered if she regretted filing that complaint afterward. Or if she convinced herself it was justice truly. I'll never know, and that truth cut deep. Because I wasn't asking for praise at all. Just not to be erased for doing my duty. Instead, the notebook held the legacy of silence. A soldier without a war, without recognition, only questions. The shop owner noticed I drifted sometimes quietly, lost in thought while changing oil or tires. One evening he asked if I was all right. I almost told him everything right there. But the words stuck, heavy like stones. How do you explain being punished for helping? How do you explain losing honor without battle? I just shrugged, said long days, that's all. He nodded, didn't press, and walked away slowly. I envied that silence, that simple acceptance. Because in the army silence was suspicion instantly. Everything judged, every phrase weighed for offense. Here in the grease and noise I felt freer. Even with cracked hands and tired eyes nightly. At least I wasn't accused for being human. But freedom didn't erase the ache entirely. The part of me that still wanted to serve. The part still loyal to a uniform that rejected me. Sometimes veterans stopped by the shop casually. Old men with caps stitched Vietnam, or Korea. They talked about service with pride glowing still. I listened quietly, nodding, fixing their cars silently, wanting to tell them I had served too, wanting to share my story, but holding back. Because what could I say to them honestly? That I was discharged for carrying a comrade. That my uniform was taken for saying guys. Their faces carried scars, medals, real battles survived. Mine carried silence, shame, and grease stains. I smiled politely, handed them their keys back. But inside, envy and grief twisted together tightly. I was part of a chain once broken, a legacy bent by rules I couldn't respect. And standing beside those men reminded me that my story didn't belong with theirs anymore. I started drinking more at night alone. Just a beer at first, then stronger slowly. The silence of the garage too heavy otherwise. The memories replayed no matter what I did. The girl's complaint, the officer's cold expression, the letter saying I failed to match values. Sometimes I slammed bottles just to drown it out. Other times I sat staring at old photos. Me in uniform, standing tall, proud, certain. That boy didn't know what was coming at all. He thought honor meant actions, not careful language. He thought courage still mattered more than optics. I hated how naive I looked in those pictures. Hated how fast the ground had shifted under me. Each drink numbed the shame only temporarily. But when morning came, the weight was heavier. A reminder that I had lost more than a job. I tried talking to my father one weekend. We sat on the porch, beers in hand. He asked why I left the service early. I hesitated, words thick in my throat. Finally, I told him the whole story honestly. About the complaint, the warnings, the discharge letter. He listened without interrupting, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. When I finished, he exhaled long and heavy. Son, that's not the army I knew, he said. His voice carried disappointment, but not at me. More at the system that chewed me up. He clapped my shoulder firmly, held it there. You carried someone. That's what matters. Those words cracked something in me finally. A small relief, a flicker of validation inside. But the shame still lingered despite his support. Because I wanted to make him proud openly. With medals and service, not broken stories of failure. After that talk, I felt lighter briefly. But the ache never fully disappeared inside. I kept showing up at the shop daily. Wrench in hand, radio buzzing, grease under nails. Life looked simple on the outside mostly. But my mind replayed the uniform constantly. The way it felt to stand in formation. The pride of marching, the weight of tradition. I missed it all more than I admitted. Yet I knew I could never go back. The system had already branded me unfit. No second chances, no redemption, just silence. I wondered if history would forget men like me. Not cowards, not traitors, just casualties of policy. And that thought chilled me deeper than winter. Because honor used to mean carrying each other. But now it felt like carrying was the crime. And I bore that irony alone every night. Autumn winds cut through the city streets sharply. I walked home after another long shift tired. Passing groups of young soldiers in uniform proudly. They laughed, joked, boots striking pavement together. I looked at them with a mix of envy and bitterness that burned low inside my chest. They still believed in something I had lost. Still thought honor was waiting at the end. I wanted to warn them, to shout truth. But my voice stayed silent, heavy with shame. Because maybe they wouldn't believe me anyway. Maybe they needed to learn it themselves. I turned the corner, smell of oil on clothes. Thinking how far I'd fallen from my dream. From medals, from parades, from family legacy. All the way down to grease-stained coveralls only. Yet part of me still longed deeply to be called a soldier with pride once more. I realized my story wasn't unique completely. Heard whispers of others discharged for the same. Not for failure in drills or combat, but for words, habits, simple human instincts. A culture that punished intent less than perception. That traded strength for slogans and optics. I felt less alone, but more afraid honestly. Because it meant the legacy was cracking everywhere. Not just my career, but the foundation itself. The brotherhood my grandfather swore by proudly. The loyalty my father lived through fire. Now fragile, breakable, conditional at best. It made me wonder what future soldiers inherit. Whether courage will even mean anything anymore. Or if service will just become performance. a stage where words weigh heavier than lives. And men like me are erased quietly, not remembered as loyal, just labeled misfit. Looking back now, I see the irony clearly. My grandfather was honored for carrying the wounded. My father respected for protecting brothers in battle. And me, I was discharged for the same instinct. Not because I failed, but because I cared. A soldier erased by words, not by actions. I work in Greece now, not in uniform. But part of me still stands at attention inside. Still believes service should mean sacrifice and courage, not policies that punish humanity itself. So I'll ask you honestly right here. Is this really equality? Is this justice at all? Or have we turned the army into theater, where words weigh more than lives themselves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story made you think tonight, leave a like so others see it too. Because maybe it's time we ask together what honor truly means anymore.